be here at this Maritime SheEO conference in this very unique time. It's such a difficult time for so many, but it gives us really this opportunity to look for innovative solutions. My name is Jillian Carson-Jackson. I am the president of the Nautical Institute. And it really is my pleasure to be here and to see the energy around Maritime SheEO and this conference. I've been in the maritime industry now since the 1980s. I started my career as an officer cadet in the Canadian Coast Guard, spent time ashore and afloat and back and forth as you do. There's a lot of wonderful opportunities that the maritime industry provides us. The visions of the Arctic and the polar bears that I saw on my trips, all the way through to working the buoy tenders and doing search and rescue. So it's been an incredible experience and an opportunity through this industry to see 3 different continents and to work in many different areas of maritime. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to having this opportunity to meet and to speak with Bart Dejong.
Likewise, Jillian, thank you for passing the floor to me. My name is Bart Dejong. I'm Consul General of the Netherlands in Mumbai, India. And we've been involved in this research project for, I think, nearly a year now. We're very glad that SheEO reached out to us at the time. And it's actually because we were having a cooperation with local authorities, maritime companies in this area for a longer period already. It's exciting to talk about that today with you, Jillian, to exchange some experiences. I may be the odd one out in this conference today because I'm Consul General, so not a maritime profession at the moment. But I do have some maritime experience. I headed the shipping division within the Ministry of Transport in the Netherlands for a number of years, quite a few years back, and it's fun to be back in the maritime field again. So let's talk about one of the most important issues that is on the agenda of this conference, and I would say also one of the most important challenges that the maritime world is facing at the moment, which is about gender equality.
It's such an important issue, and it really is. When I joined the industry back in the 1980s, the IMO was starting to embark on this program to support and to empower women in maritime. And at that time, I believe it was 1.8% of seafarers were female. And here we are in 2020, and we have about 2% of seafarers are female. So something has to change. Now, we all have our own story, and I've been asked to share a little bit of my story with you all here. And one of the biggest things, I guess, to share is that I didn't mean to go to sea. I didn't even know it was an option. It was something that was not promoted, definitely was not promoted to women. And it wasn't even promoted the maritime industry in my high school at all. I actually found out about the opportunities completely by accident. And actually, when I put my name forward to join the Coast Guard, a friend of mine who had been working as a relief seafarer on one of the shell ships said, "Oh, you'll never do it. Women can't do that job." So of course, being who I am, that made me want to do it all the more. Over my 30 plus years that I've had, I've come to realize that the power of women in maritime, the power is there, but we need to be seen and we need to be heard. And 2019, it provided a year to focus on women in maritime, thanks to that the World Maritime Day theme that we had. And I had the opportunity to run with a very good colleague of mine, Janine Drummond, a challenge called Women in Maritime 365. And we posted a profile and photos of women in maritime every single day, 365 profiles for all of 2019. And it's actually continued now into 2020. When we first started, they said, "You'll never do it. There's no way. There's not that many women in maritime." But you wouldn't believe how many more women there are in maritime. But it really does mean you need to see it to be it. It also means that you need to be willing to be seen. And for so many years, I wanted to fit in. I did not want to be seen. It was my role to be a chameleon, to fit in, to be one of the guys, because I felt that the only way I could stay at sea was to do that. I was actively discouraged from being on the ships. I had flowers sent to me for my birthday that were thrown overboard because that's bad luck. I had an umbrella on the ship that disappeared because that was bad luck. We had notes left on our bunks as women, as cadets, about articles from newspapers why women were bad luck on ships. And I was facing this every single day as a young seafarer just going to sea. So I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to do my job because I loved it. It was amazing. But sometimes to make change, you need to change. So I see a real desire now in this industry to embrace that change. And it's wonderful to see the opportunities that I have now, for example, to take on the role of the president of the Nautical Institute. It is a testimony to that change. I still remember that amazing moment when I was awarded a fellowship of the Nautical Institute, a fellowship that's awarded by my peers. So it's an amazing opportunity. That's the thrill of that. And then to be elected to this position of president of an organization that represents maritime professionals around the globe. It's an inspiration for me to have this opportunity, but it is also, I think, an obligation. So all those years ago, I didn't want to be seen, but now I think we must be seen in order to be able to make that change. So to make that change, I've had to change. There's an interesting quote from a Deloitte Access Economics report. It was the Westpac Diversity Dividend Report in 2017. And I quote, having equal gender representation in leadership could be worth an extra 10.8 billion to the economy. Businesses could record an average of 2.1 percentage point increase in profitability through reaching gender parity in senior management. Now, I do use this quote in my presentations. And one of my students asked me, how can they know that? How can you assess the financial impact of diversity? How do you define a business case for diversity? So it really brings me to this question and to Bart, to ask you, why, as the Consulate General of Mumbai, did you feel it was important to address this issue, this concept of this business case for diversity, especially within the maritime industry?
Well, let me first say that I'm amazed by your story. You've come you've come a long way, so to say, right? In a time that it wasn't accepted at all, that women were not accepted at all in the maritime sector, let alone on a ship. So that's amazing to hear, and also encouraging. I think encouraging to a lot of women or girls even that are contemplating to make that choice. But anyway, why did we as a consulate step into this whole thing? In the first place, I think it's because the Netherlands is a strong advocate of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And it has been said before today in the conference that SDG 5, gender equality, empowerment of women and girls, that is an important one, a very important one. We've embraced that in our foreign policy, so not only for shipping, but for all kinds of areas. And it goes without saying, especially after having heard your story, that in the maritime sector, it is particularly necessary to empower girls and women, because there is an enormous underrepresentation of female gender in the maritime sector. 2%. That's what I also learned, and that's also, I think, in the report we have at Finance. But the 2%, I think 96% of those 2% of these women, they are active in a sort of traditional women's role. So they play an important role in the hotel jobs on vessels and things like that. And of course, in the offices ashore, there are also a lot of traditional roles. All in all, it's 24% in the maritime sector, including all the job or the shore jobs, and that has to change. It's far below any other sector in the economy. So that is why we thought these two combinations that it would be useful to do this study, see what the situation is in India and what we can do about it. Now, I say India. Why did we do this particularly in Mumbai? I can explain that in the sense that we have, for a number of years now, we have a cooperation with maritime authorities here. And we have arranged so-called ports fora, where we get together a lot of people in the maritime industry as a whole, not only the ports, because ports, of course, are dependent on the shipping industry itself and what have you around it, finance or whatever. So we have these 4 ports fora, and it amazed me to see how many companies are interested in that from both sides, both from the Netherlands and India, how many people attended these fora, and also actually how many women from both sides attended it. And that is an interesting contradiction, I sense. So I think this must have been also one of the reasons, because this cooperation was already there for a few years. It must have been also one of the reasons that SheEO came to the Consulate and said, okay, this is interesting. Can't we do something together? We see there is a lack of knowledge about the business case for women in maritime, and that's why we decided to do the study, do this report. Now, to come back to your question on how do you know? How do you know what the added value is? That's a difficult one. The people that have read the report may know that there is not a lot of hard statistical data, but that isn't always necessary. You can tell by the stories, ample stories in that report, of women leaders in maritime companies that basically the outcome is that everybody says this is, let's say, a positive development. When we have more women in, not only in the board, but also in lower ranks, this is positive. This has a positive influence on our business. In general, it is perceived that there are a number of areas where women would perform less than men. If we look at the highly technical jobs, and the ability to penetrate certain markets, those kinds of things. That also what is generally said is that if you have a lot of women, you have a lot of absenteeism also. Well, all these things are prejudices, and this is what the report says. These are prejudices, and these do not seem to have a negative impact on the company at all. On the contrary, there are a number of positive impacts. For instance, women being more creative, the fact that you have men and women cooperating creates extra positivity. It's also good for your brand if you have women in your company. So all these kinds of things, they make that at the end of the quotation, you find that having more women in your company is conducive to your business. So it's a positive outcome, I would say. And yeah, I think this is something that we should work on in future. Maybe quantify things, maybe prove things. But if you, as I said, if you have all these women CEOs sometimes, or women board members, if you have them and confirming that what I just said, that should be a good reason for other companies to have a look at their own composition of the labor force and do something about that.
And that brings me to one of the thoughts that I was going to ask you about, how you approach the survey itself, but you think you covered all of those elements. It brings me to the idea that women and diversity in any industry can only be good for that industry, because it gives you much broader concept. I always think that there's no such thing as any expert. We are communities of experts. And the more expertise that you can bring in, the more of those ideas and that vision, the stronger that you would have on the actual business. So it brings it back down to that business case. When I look at women and your comment also about the roles that women were playing, the more traditional, although they might be in industry in maritime, it was in the more traditional role. That visibility of a woman working in a traditionally non-female role, I think really is important. So it comes back to having that visibility, women leaders, and having women at the highest points. In your report, were there any surprises that you found in the discussions that you had, or any of the outcomes that came from that?
So yeah, sorry, I didn't get the question really.
So in the report, when I read through the report, there was actually a number of very strong women leaders who
Yeah.
were represented in your business case, for the business case. And I believe that in the report as well, you highlight the benefits that they have there. Were there any surprises that you saw within the discussions that you had, or any from the results that came back? Are there any elements or any items that you thought, oh, I'm not quite sure, I didn't expect to see that?
Yeah, what the funny thing is that you actually in your introduction touched upon one of these already. That is that you needed to fit in. You didn't want to be visible, and the visibility of women in certain jobs in the maritime sector is so important. If we want to attract more women to the maritime sector, the visibility is number one. We need role models. Women and girls need role models. Women that show that you actually can have a meaningful career in the maritime sector, and you can make the difference. And that is something that I think was yeah, one of the striking things in the report. And actually, I was struck by a quote that Nafisa Molobai made, and she will be in the session just after us. And she says, well, it's not just because they're women, but it is, it's the fire in the belly and the passion and energy level of the candidate that lures me into recruiting them. So it's not because they're women, but it is because of their being, their human being, and their character. That's what you should be. That's what you are recruited on. And if you're not visible and also not showing that off as a role model, then it remains under the surface. And those women that have made the step, or have the ambition to pursue a maritime career, they would also want to fit in. They fit in and they do not step up. So this visibility and stepping up is something which is crucial, I think.
And that visibility and being able to be who you are, to bring your whole self, your complete being to work, rather than trying to hide. There was one time when I was on the ship, and I remember trying to work very, very hard to fit in. And it was a really difficult time on board that vessel. I was having a lot of harassment, a lot of difficult times. And at one of the events that we were having, one of the deckhands was not being exactly the way that I would want somebody to be, and just was being much too close, and I just did not like it. And so I just threw my arms out, and I actually managed to hit him, and he fell backwards and broke a table. And I felt really, really bad. And everyone else said, Jillian, that's fantastic. Don't be bad. Don't be sorry for who you are, because you really needed to do that. He was really driving all of us crazy too. So it's that being willing to be seen and to be out there, rather than trying to hide away. To be a leader, though, is difficult, and not all women are cut out for it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be. You shouldn't have to be in this industry. You should be able to come to the industry and do the job that you've been trained to do, and just be there, because you're just as good. And ultimately, ideally, it won't make a difference if you're a woman or a man, or if you're of any other type of gender diversity, any national diversity. You're there to do the job and get the job, because you're the best at that job.
Yeah, and show who you are. Yeah, the funny thing is that you maybe fitted into it too much in the male culture by hitting him and
there is that too. There is that. Yeah. So there is this concept of trying to fit in, but we need to also be comfortable with who we are. And the fact is that no matter what we are within our diverse environment, it's our diversity that brings the strength. And if you're looking at improving business outcomes and coming up to solutions for unforeseen problems, you know, we look at this environment we're in right now with COVID. Who could have seen this happening? It has actually driven us to seek out more innovative solutions. And we are now working in a very dynamic environment across time zones and across the globe where we never would have thought that before.
Yeah.
Now, innovation, what are your thoughts on innovation when you're looking at a diverse workforce and how diversity may support innovation?
Well, actually, looking at innovation and the role of women in workforce, this is also generally accepted idea that if you have a diverse workforce, so not only male and female, but also ethnic backgrounds, those kinds of things, you see that a diverse constitution creates innovation. It's conducive to innovation. People start being more creative because their ideas are sort of soundboarded from a different perspective, and that of course creates innovative solutions. So that is generally one of the reasons also why we think that well, the gender equality SDG is so important, beside other SDGs as well, of course. So yeah, and that goes, of course, also for the maritime sector. The funny thing is that you mentioned, well, it's not so funny, but you mentioned, you touched upon COVID. Yeah, COVID is bringing a lot of innovation on the one hand, right? We're on worldwide, where we're doing all kinds of things that we couldn't imagine a year ago. But the sad news is that actually I think it was published today or or 2 days ago, that the number of women being appointed in the past half year in boards of bigger companies is dramatically dropping. Because what you see is that appointing women in leadership jobs in a big company that traditionally is a male-dominated culture, appointing women there is sometimes perceived as taking a risk. And suddenly you see that all these companies are being threatened in their economic existence, that they sort of do not want to take that risk at the moment. So that's the explanation I read, which might well be the case, right? But it's sad in a time where we just saw these figures gradually picking up, the attention gradually picking up, and maybe that's an extra case to make now, to make sure that we have the importance of promoting women in these kinds of jobs on the agenda for the time to come.
And I think that is very important. Yes, I've read that as well, and it's disheartening to see that after so much effort, and I go back to that I started in this industry in the 80s, 1980s, and we are now in 2020, and I am seeing women post stories of activities and events and strategies and the struggles that they're going through, which are exactly the same that I went through in 1983 and 84. So why is that? And where we aren't going ahead. If we're not going ahead, then we must be going backwards. And this, your comments there do show that. There has been a push to pledge your support. There was a lot of work in 2019, and actually the Nautical Institute as well has put out a pledge to support diversity and inclusion in the industry. And I'm wondering if we put forward those concepts of those pledges, but yet we're seeing a backsliding in the appointment of women, where does it go from words to action? And what is it that we might be missing in this connection between the desire to see and to promote a diverse environment for all those reasons, the business case that we said, but the reality that we are not getting there, and we have not made the progress that we would have thought we would have made in 30 plus years?
To be honest with you, that is one of the big question marks I had when I headed the shipping division in the Netherlands, because apart from women being underrepresented, there is a shortage of employees in the maritime sector. And the profession isn't just very sexy anymore, especially not for seafarers, because you're giving up a lot of things, right? If you go on a ship on a vessel for a number of years and not being home often with poor internet connections and those kinds of things. So it was very difficult to lure youngsters to the maritime sector. And then what struck me is that all our efforts until then were just aimed at the traditional boys. You went to polytechnics and vocational training, technical vocational trainings to raise appetite with them, but we didn't really specifically target the girls in schools. We didn't specifically target people from ethnic minorities. So you were actually we were actually concentrating on the same pond, so to say, of people that were well, possible employees in the maritime sectors, but we didn't venture out of that traditional circle, and it proved very hard to change that. It proved very hard to change that, and yeah, that I don't have an explanation, but that's the way it still is, I'm afraid, because we don't see these figures up or go up, or we at least not dramatically or substantially going up. So I don't have an explanation. But the thing is that I noted in my own country, and I think that must be the same in other countries as well, that we do not target the specific groups in targeted campaigns or so.
That does bring me to one of the very difficult questions that keeps popping up every time I'm talking about diversity and inclusion and promoting the need to increase the percentage of women and actually work towards perhaps a goal. And that is this idea of targets or quotas.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, it comes back to the fact, and even just recently I was in a meeting and we were talking about supporting women and ensuring that we have enough women on a panel that was going, or women who are actually able to be identified as candidates for roles, because there's a lot of fear then from men that women are taking their jobs away from them, and this idea of quotas. So what are your thoughts? It's a very emotive issue, this concept of quotas, and I do hear things both, very, very well defined explanations on both sides why you do need them and why you don't. But I'd be interested to know about your thoughts on that.
That's a very, let's say, sensitive issue. To be honest with you, well, to give you an example, we have a technical university in Eindhoven, which is technical universities are male dominated everywhere, and they also realized they have a huge underrepresentation of women in their staff of lecturers. And they realized that, let's say, a positive policy to employ women wasn't enough. And then at a certain point, they said, I think it was 2 years ago, they said every new lecturer, professor that we recruit should be a woman. So no new men coming in. And in the end, that was not sustainable. I don't think they took it to court whether that was legal or not, but also the women didn't like it, because if that's you don't want to be recruited or selected because you're a woman. So, and that actually it goes back to the quotation I made from Navisa, that she said, you know, that's not what we should recruit on. And so I think it's very difficult to and also sensitive to prioritize women because they're women. No, you should first have a look at the quality, and as we say in a lot of selection processes, first have a look at the quality, and indeed, if we have two candidates that are equally qualified, then we go for the woman. So that is a way to approach it. But I wouldn't say we're a fan of women quota in recruitment of.
It always pops up, and even if it isn't something that you're talking about, if it isn't actually the quota idea, but there's still this thought that if you have an organization that is supporting diversity and inclusion, then there often comes these comments and these thoughts that are very negative. And yeah. In fact, when I got my first role at the Canadian Coast Guard College as an instructor, when I came ashore, one of my colleagues said to me, he said, I knew you'd get the job. You're the only woman who applied. And then for the entire time that I was there working, I was, the only reason I got this job is because I'm a woman. Well, no, you have to have that confidence to know that you were the best candidate that was chosen at the time. So even if there aren't quotas, it is something that's absolutely, it's there until we get that tipping point. And I write articles for Daily Cargo News in Australia here once a month. They have a Women in Maritime column, which has been a wonderful support. but I wrote an article, it's called The Tipping Point. So we need to reach that tipping point so that it's
Exactly.
not seen as being different. And ultimately, in order to reach that tipping point, it can't be only the women who promote this. We need to have people like yourself, and it needs to be supported across the board that diversity and inclusion is good for the bottom line, which
Absolutely.
brings me back to the business case.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, absolutely, absolutely. That is indeed what I think is necessary. So it's a mind shift, and the mind shift not only with women because they've made it already, but the mind shift is basically with the men in decision making positions. And actually, I think that a report like we produced on the gender equality in the maritime sector in India could be helpful in that, because it shows indeed there's not quantifiable, but there is proof that it is good for your company and it has a positive impact on your business. And I would also say that yeah, there is a role for the men, but there's also a man, the employer, but there's also a role for the women themselves. I mean, they should take up the challenge. Don't be shy, as we said in the beginning. Step up. And also act as role models. Once you're there, act as a role model. Speak out like you yourself are doing now. That's excellent. And we need more women that are not shy and take up these public roles and speak for women in general, I would say. So, and I hope that this report can help in that. And also that I think it will also be a nice challenge for a CEO to work on that in India.
I think so, and really what Maritime SheEO has been doing over the past while and with this conference has provided us with a really great platform and an opportunity to explore a little bit deeper some of the challenges that we have, and to realize that we can't work in silos. We do need to work in a collaborative approach across the industry as a whole, so not just ashore, but also afloat,
Sure.
and not just in the boardrooms, but also on the deck. And it gives us this opportunity to think and to consider the future, where we are going within this aspect of diversity and inclusion, and realize that diversity and inclusion is good. There is a business case, and we are the ones to support it. We have an opportunity and an obligation, women and men and all ethnics working together, so that we can have a solid and effective, vibrant, robust industry moving into the future, not only going through this COVID time, but looking much further into the future. And that's where our strength will come from. The vibrancy will come from a diverse and inclusive organization.
Absolutely. And for people that still need to be convinced, I would recommend them to read the report and hear these or read these first-hand stories from people, women, basically mostly women, in the maritime sector here. So yeah, I agree completely.